It's Kevin McCullough, and I hope that you're okay. I'm okay. We're all okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for filling your life with the AFR Talk product. We've got so much for you each weekday, and we're always so glad to be able to come your way and to engage the stories of the day on a very important topic or idea, something that's in the news on a regular basis. And we're just grateful for your participation in this broadcast and for desiring to be what I call a binge thinker, people that think clearly, people that have a desire to use truth as is found in the Word of God to impact the world that they live in, the families that they are participating in, and the lives that they lead. It is a very comforting thing for me to know that you are diligent about that effort today. So thank you for being there. Thank you for doing what you do every single day. And thanks for participating with us. 888-589-8840. We're talking about this article from Christianity Today in which the author, Stephanie Smith is her name, says it's not always a good thing for the good wife to stay in a relationship in which there has been, in my estimation, a biblical reason for why you can, in fact, divorce your husband, and that would be if he was unfaithful and the road travels the other way, man to wife as well. But is it good for the wife to always stay? That's really the question that she's asking, and I've posed that question to you in light of the fact that Huma Abedin, and I got to tell you, just in my own circle of female friends and the friends of the lovely bride, where we've had this discussion with lots of other women, I've asked them, would you stay in her circumstance? And they would almost to a person say, well, no, not indefinitely. If this was the second time that this was popping up and he was obviously doing this, we would do everything we could to try to fix it. But it doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed go, that we're going to be there for all time and memorial beyond that. And these are Christian women. These are people that read the Word, that understand the Word, that are in it on a daily basis. So it's interesting to see how what is perceived to be an attempt on Huma's part by the culture at large to be a, quote, good wife, to stay with her husband, it's perceived to be that might not necessarily be that. 888-589-8840. Let's go back to the phones and speak with Janice, who's calling from Virginia. Hey, Janice, welcome. You're on with Kevin McCullough on AFA Today.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I just feel like the question shouldn't define whether she stays or goes as a good wife or bad wife. What I don't like is the implication by wives that if I forgive my man, you're supposed to vote for him. And because their sin of sex addiction or adultery, whatever, for the public, we only know that time will tell. And, this is way too soon to see if Mr. Weiner is over his sex addiction or whatever he does, sexting problems. But it shouldn't define her as a woman, whether she's good or bad, as a wife, whether she stays or goes. I don't like the implication of who I should vote for because of how they react to their husband.
Right. And that's what Stephanie Smith made clear in her article. She said, I was glad to hear Huma put stuff in her own voice and to say, this is why I made my decision. But she said the offensive part was when she kind of put that on everybody else as though to say, so because I trust him, you have to as well. And I keep going back to, for good or for worse, I keep going back to the Clinton era in which I'm not sure that Hillary standing by Bill accomplished anything, but I remember the argument being, well, it's just sex, everybody does it. It doesn't mean that he won't do a good job. See, I kind of think that the character of the individual is tied up in the quality of the job that they do. So integrity counts, public integrity counts, and if you're, I don't know, if you're pursuing things that you believe aren't harmful to the job, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're using a skill set that's going to make you better in the job. And if, in fact, you're practicing habits that are counterproductive to the trust of who you are in the personal arena, I would think that that's going to have a bad impact in who you are in the professional arena as well. It's just my opinion.
If nothing else, it's distracting, and we don't need a distracted leader.
Right, especially when my tax dollars are paying him very generously for the position to be there.
Exactly. But I think
All
you're
right.
taking my call.
Thank you, Janice. I appreciate that. Very thoughtful response. Let's go to Marie, who's calling from Texas. Marie, welcome. You're on AFA Today with Kevin McCullough. Glad you're here.
Thanks. I was in a marriage for 10 years. My ex-husband had 13 affairs that I know of.
13?
13 that I know of. And so in the beginning, we went to the church, we went to the minister, we got counseling, we went through all of those things. And then towards the end, when I realized that things weren't getting better, that his behavior wasn't changing, and that he was not holding himself accountable, I really, really struggled with, biblically as a wife, what do I do? Because I'm not technically in any danger. He wasn't abusive or anything along those lines. And it was my minister that came to me and said, you know what, God is not going to fault you for walking away from this. You've put into it everything you possibly could. And so I think it's a very personal decision, and I feel for the woman that she's having to deal with this in the public eye, so to speak, because I know how difficult and shameful it was for me just within our family and friends.
Sure. Well, Marie, the interesting thing about what you just said is that I think most Bible scholars would say there is an allowance for adultery. That's obviously an exit clause if you want to get out of a marriage. It doesn't always mean that marriages plagued by adultery have to end, and I've seen where God has worked in lives, and some marriages have been restored, but I've seen a lot more where they kind of peter along for a little while and then eventually, not end up working out. And it usually has to do with something that you said about no real change occurring. I'm a little bit surprised that after 13 affairs, there was some doubt in your mind as to whether or not you were on biblical grounds to make a decision along that way. What kept you from knowing that for sure before your pastor said anything?
There are children in the marriage, and I also struggled with wanting to be able to look my children in the eye later and say, I did everything I could to keep your home intact. Because it was very difficult. The youngest was 4 when I decided to leave, and he went through a lot of emotional scars. He's 14 now and still dealing with it.
Sure.
However, I will say that my ex-husband, in the relationships that the relationships that he was in at the time that the marriage ended, eventually ended. Ironically, one of the women that he had cheated on me with cheated on him, and he was just totally devastated. But he has, from what I have seen in the marriage that he's in now, he is faithful, and it is something he's overcome, and I'm thankful for that for the sake of my boys. But it was a matter of being able to say, I've given it all I can. There's nothing else I can do.
That is a very heartbreaking story, Marie, and I appreciate you sharing it with us, because I think that you're helping other women that may not be going through a situation as severe as yours, but you may be telling them some things that are going to confirm some things for them one way or the other, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. Friends, I don't even begin to pretend that this is an easy topic to address. I have had my own life affected by serial betrayal in more than one relationship. Both of my fathers, both my genetic DNA donor and the man who is my adoptive father, betrayed on different levels marriages and families in different ways. And when you are touched by that, it is almost impossible for someone to know really what you're walking through unless they have experienced similarly. But I do find it ironic that we still have in this day and age some ideas that in order to honor God, I am supposed to put myself in a place where I can either be repeatedly emotionally abused and cheated upon and embarrassed and humiliated, and or be physically threatened or beaten or abused in some way. I think that we have to tread very, very carefully when we are advising people in those circumstances, because God makes it clear He loves that woman that is being abused and beaten and hurt every bit as much as He loves the man that is doing it. And why I'm discouraged is that in certain circles of Christianity, I have seen a lot of preaching about female submission, which in our family we practice. The lovely bride and I will discuss everything. We will go through start to finish, A to Z, all the way through. We will discuss every element of every angle on everything. And at the end of the day, she will say, but you're the one that needs to make the decision, and I will trust your outcome. And I think because of the mutual honor that she bestows to me, the willingness to desire to make a decision that's healthy for the family on every level and include her input and usually her overriding common sense will drive me to make the decision that she would likely be in favor of anyway. In 10 years of marriage, I can think of maybe one thing, and I couldn't even tell you what that is, but maybe there's been one thing where I've made a decision that went counter to what her gut instinct told her, and I probably lived to regret it at that. But the more that you honor her, the easier, and show demonstrable love to her, the easier it is for her to say, I'm going to submit and honor him. And that's actually the biblical language. It's not, man, you get to abuse your wife and she has to submit. That's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that first, before the submission comes, before the submission occurs, before you even have the right to demand the submission from her, before you even think you have the right to do that, you show her selfless love, sacrificial love. How do we know that that's the idea of love? Because it's as Christ loved the church. And what did he do? He gave up his life for them. At the end of the day, if the man is laying down his life, willing to lose everything, including his life, for her well-being, she will feel loved and esteemed, and there will be a mutual honor that comes back to him because of that. The idea that men get to walk around and do whatever they want and say, well, if you really honor God, you'll submit to me, that's a bunch of garbage. And I think we need to make sure that that is not coming from our pulpits. The call, first and foremost, far more important than the submission issue, is the degree of sacrificial love that the man is expressing to his wife, because he is in the position of the symbol of Christ in that marriage. Marriage is a picture of Christ in the church. And every time a divorce occurs, it sends a lie that Christ can somehow be separated from his church, that in some way Christ can be unfaithful to his bride. That will never occur. Human divorce is an amplification of that lie that the enemy sends. At the end of the day, the man loving sacrificially, putting his own needs aside, doing all that he can for her welfare, that is the power of a godly marriage. And you will see endless amounts of joy come from your bride as you love her self-sacrificially. 888-589-8840. Let's take a few more calls before we're done. Let's talk to Lee calling from I don't know where. Hey, Lee, welcome.
Hello. I'm calling from Texas.
All right.
And,
what's your thought?
Well, I think that in August, my husband and I will be married 35 years.
Congratulations.
And, well, thank you. But we've been separated now we've been living apart for almost a year now. And neither of us were Christians when we married many years ago. And at one point in our marriage, I accepted Jesus as my Savior. My husband didn't. And, sometimes, the persecution that comes is worse in your own home sometimes. It's not physical abuse, but, there was, some, verbal and emotional persecution going on. But I really felt, I had children, and now we have grandkids. We have, kids and grandkids now. But I realized about a year ago, as my husband's many addictions, to my knowledge, he's never been unfaithful. But it's been alcohol and drugs and gambling and, things along that line. I kind of realized, and I think it was the Holy Spirit showing me this, how I was enabling him. Always covering up for him or, trying to make his wrongs right. and trying to cover it for the family and making excuses for him why he.
And in the
end,
at the end of the day, Lee, that probably is enabling, because you can't continue to leave him unchecked and unaccountable. Not if there are other people involved. If it's just you and him, you can say, "Hey, this is between us." When children come into the picture, when extended families come into the picture, that becomes a bit of a different story. And I appreciate your call. Real quickly, let's see if I can get Renee on before we're done. Renee calling from Mississippi. Renee, you may be our last caller today. Thanks for your patience. You're on with Kevin McCullough. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Very quickly, what's your thought?
Listening to your program, and I've been through a divorce where there was adultery and stuff, and I actually did stay for a while in the marriage. But when it come down to it and it had to be over with, I actually had to go with the law that y'all was talking about that was passed for the no-fault divorce. And I went that route because the lawyer was saying that it was cheaper and stuff, and that's really all I could afford. I would have had to fight in court and all that, but I do believe that God knows really what was up in my marriage and stuff. So
I think he does too, Renee, and I don't want you to beat yourself up for that. I wasn't saying that no fault. Most divorces are no fault. Very few people contest them for any reason whatsoever anymore. Kevin McCullough, you want to weigh in more on this, go to afatoday.com. That's afatoday.com. And many more stories tonight on the Kevin McCullough Show on many of these same places, so I hope that you will be with us for that. Kevin McCullough saying tomorrow we'll see you again right here at 1 Central, noon Central, 1 Eastern for AFA Today. Have a great one.